Welcome back, everyone. For those joining us for the first time for this session, my name is Andrew Dahlberg. I'm the president of Champion Briefs and your host for today's sessions. We've already had a few great coaching clinics on how to coach speech events, team communication, some additional online tips and tricks for coaches and students. And now we're moving into our second to last of the day, which is going to be coaching debate events. After this session, we'll have another short break. And then at 3:30, we have our tournament logistics and preparation session with Ben Gaddis. So we just have these two left for the day. As always, if you're here joining us, watch the session, take it all in, but don't be too worried if you miss something. We will be recording these and posting them to our site later for your review. And you'll also receive a few of the resources that are talked about in each session as a standalone file so you can download them. With that, I'm excited to turn it over to Charles Karcher, who's going to be hosting our coaching debate events session. So Charles, take it away.
Sorry, I was muted. Hi, everyone. My name is Charles Karcher. Thank you, Andrew, for the introduction. I'm going to share my screen. I think I'm good to do that. Let's see if it works. Okay, can everyone, Andrew, can we see my screen on your end of the Zoom?
Yep, I can see it.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. So we're going to start this slideshow. So today I'm going to be talking about coaching debate events, how to do it, some good strategies for building up a team, doing things like research, training novices, things like this. So just as an introduction, who am I? My name's Charles. As I said, I debated at Sarasota High School in Sarasota, Florida, and now I attend the University of Florida where I study interdisciplinary humanities and French. I started debate in public forum my freshman and sophomore year of high school. Then my partner graduated and I competed solo in LincolnDouglas. At UF, I've competed in college policy, and now I coach public forum at Lake Highland Prep. So I've seen each of the three major debate events. I'm pretty well versed in them. I've had like different phases with like each one. And I think they all have like really important value, and I get very excited doing any of it. So I write for Champion Briefs in the topic analyses, which some of you may have subscriptions to. And I've also worked at several summer debate institutes. And if any of you are Florida coaches, I've contributed to the Florida Blue Key Speech and Debate Tournament, which is a student-run tournament at UF over the past 3 years. So maybe you've attended that and I've emailed you or something. So today we're going to be talking about a brief overview of debate events, just so we're all on the same page about what the differences are. We're going to be focusing on public forum and Lincoln-Douglas, just because those are the two popular ones for teams that are starting out, as well as I know that's what Champion Briefs preps research for. So I figure that's probably what most of y'all are interested in. Then we're going to talk about things like research and file production and file management. These are all very important things because debate involves a lot of evidence and reading and Word documents, etc. Then we're going to talk about how, I don't know if these last three are in the precise order that I'm going to do them in, but we're going to talk about how we're going to tackle new topics with a team, how we can train novices, and then also resources to help you get started. So first, we're going to just talk about the major differences between the two debate events we're going to deal with today, public forum and Lincoln-Douglas. So public forum is a partnered event, meaning that you have two students on one side, the pro or the con, debating two other students from a different school on the other side, the pro or the con. The topics that the NSTA releases emphasize things like current events, global issues, and domestic policy. Public forum is geared towards being accessible to a public forum. It was started in the early 2000s when Lincoln-Douglas was started in the 90s, and Lincoln-Douglas started going in a direction that became a little bit more inaccessible, which we'll talk about in a few minutes here. So it's mostly a place where, you know, any debater can go, theoretically, any debater can go and do some research and come prepared to a competition without having to jump through a lot of hoops of complex argumentation and advanced training. As such, the flip side of that is that public forum is also meant to be able to be judged and evaluated by any person off the street. Hypothetically, a public forum tournament should, you should be able to have judges that you go onto the sidewalk outside of a school and be like, hey, do you speak English? They say yes. And you say, okay, cool, come judge a debate round. It should be accessible to anyone with like any basic knowledge or civic engagement levels. Topics are bi-monthly for the fall semester. This is a very new thing that I'm still getting used to. So September, October is the same topic, and then November, December is the same topic. And then come the spring semester, topics are monthly. And that's just to make sure that teams have time to get on their feet, train novices and things like this in the fall semester. Which I think is very helpful, because bouncing around from topic to topic every month can be very stressful, as we're going to see in terms of topic prep. So having a little bit more time to unpack one topic and just focus on skill development in students is important for the fall semester. It's also known as POFO, CUFO, PUFFY, or PF. I've heard this is kind of a joke in the debate circuit, like different areas call public forum different things. But I call it public forum or PFs. That's what we'll be referring to it today with. LincolnDouglas is a solo event, so it's one student versus one student. In contrast to public forum, topics emphasize moral, ethical, and philosophical issues. So if you have students that are more interested in thinking abstractly, or if they're just straight up interested in things like philosophy or psychology, this is an event that they might be more geared for. LincolnDouglas uses a lot of jargon and advanced argument structures. More experience is useful, but not a mandate to judge LincolnDouglas. If you have a judge training, maybe your local circuit does a training at the beginning of the year for judges, they will be more than set to judge a LincolnDouglas debate, but any parent judge going into a round might be confused just by what the debaters are saying without knowing what some of the jargon means. I'm not going to get into that jargon today. That's something that I have resources for at the end, but it is important to understand the basic sort of structure that makes LincolnDouglas different. And that's pretty much that debaters establish a value framework at the top of their case, which is the philosophical section. I don't want to get too far into it. There are resources at the end, but I just want you to have that in your mental maps so you understand that difference from PF. Topics are permanently bi-monthly, so September, October, November, December, January, February, and then March, April. There are certain thematics that these months follow. So historically, and sometimes there are ruptures in this pattern, but I mean, historically, March, April, for example, is typically a question of US domestic or foreign policy. January, February is usually like an international issue. November, December is usually a legal issue. And then September, October, I realize I'm going in reverse here, but September, October is usually a very sort of household moral issue. That's where you would see topics that appeal to things like individual liberties versus, collective duty, stuff like that. Obviously, that's not a permanent pattern, but generally those thematics follow year after year, decade after decade. So, for example, the current LincolnDouglas debate topics, they're voted on by NSDA members. Both students and schools are able to vote, and those votes are weighted differently. I'm not really sure what the formula is, but sometimes you'll see sort of quirky results here with proportions and stuff. But I think that the NSDA weights school votes more heavily than student votes. So the November, December topic for LincolnDouglas was that a just government ought to recognize an unconditional right of workers to strike. And then the January, February topic is resolved the appropriation of outer space by private entities is unjust. One thing to notice here is that these topics, if you were to have a casual debate with your friends about them, and theoretically you made a topic, you could simplify it to a much easier phrasing, but Lincoln-Douglas topics particularly use specific words to appeal to certain aspects of debate and philosophy. So for example, appropriation, that's a very specific term of art that is used in the regulatory negotiations of private space development, right? So the topic committee, which Nathan is a member of, who was in here earlier, who's one of our leaders today, pick words and phrases that that are conducive to a really healthy and engaging debate for both sides. Another example of this is a just government, as you'll see in the top topic. Just government is a phrase that's used over and over again in many Lincoln-Douglas topics. And what it means is a government that's just, a government that values and prioritizes and executes justice. Ought is another really important word. I would say 95% of Lincoln-Douglas resolutions have ought in them. It usually appeals to the word morality. So debaters say that, oh, we should value morality in this round. Anyway, public forum debate topics obviously look a lot different. So the recent ones, one from November, December was increased United States federal regulation of cryptocurrency transactions and or assets will produce more benefits than harms. And then the January topic area is US drug policy. And it reads, resolved, the United States federal government should legalize all illicit drugs. There has been a general shift in what PF topics have looked like, even since when I've debated. So even since 4 years ago, public forum topics are slowly starting to look more like policy topics. We're not going to talk about policy today, but policy debate is premised on very specific advocacies being debated by two teams, two debaters in each team, and longer speeches, very much more in-depth argumentation, and a lot more evidence is read at very rapid paces. And these topics are starting to look more like policy topics, which is interesting because public forum is not meant to be policy. Public forum is meant to be a very general, sort of accessible form of debate. So the fact that these resolutions are now using terms like the United States federal government, which implies a very specific advocacy in that the United States federal government should do something, is a major change from what PF used to be. If you don't follow, that's okay. Just a brief tangent about what's happening to PF, which I'm going to touch on, I think on the next slide. Yeah, so you might have heard traditional debate versus progressive debate. This is a really important sort of, I don't want to say tension, but for lack of a better word, I'll say tension in the debate community. Not even these days, this has been going on for 15 years now, I guess. I mean, even longer than that in policy debate. But pretty much, there you have traditional debate, which is like what you think of when you think of debate. This is when students speak at a conversational pace. They use quote unquote normal argument structures. They'll use a very sensical flow of arguments in their case. They'll say, you know, because for this reason we should affirm the resolution, or for this reason we should negate the resolution. It uses sort of, you know, layperson vocabulary and layperson levels of understanding of issues. If it does get more complex than that, it's up to the debaters to explain that to you at a level that should be accessible to people of any knowledge level. Progressive debate, on the other hand, is what you hear about when you hear about spreading or the national circuit or camps like summer debate institutes. Back in the 90s in policy debate, students were upset with, they weren't upset with it, but you know, debate obviously has time limits. There are like limits to speech times, and debaters realized that if they spoke a little bit faster, they could cram more arguments into their speeches, you know, in one speech. And that created a sort of, what we say in debate, a race to the bottom effect, where people just started speaking faster and faster than each other, and the judges had to keep up. So it created this community of judges that were able to follow hyper fast speaking, which kind of resulted in where we are today, where in policy debate, progressive rounds happen at 500 words per minute, which is absolutely incomprehensible to the untrained ear. Also, along with that, you have advanced argumentation. which goes a lot. I'm talking about argumentation that, you can read a sentence and like you will know that it's English, but it is so convoluted and uses so much jargon that you would not be able to articulate what any of it means. It's kind of become a caricature of itself, how complicated some progressive debate strategies have gotten. It's honestly Kafkaesque in that it's just like you feel like you're lost in a maze of like bureaucracy and policy analysis and big postmodern buzzwords, and it can get a lot. It can get to be a lot. So usually progressive debate is sort of the destination that teams get to when they have a solid enough foundation of members that are trained with traditional debate to start to explore both, geographically, going to other tournaments and seeing how other people argue and what arguments they use, but then also intellectually, reading more books in the context of LD, for example, diving into more complicated philosophy or, reading advanced critical theory, things like this. So I mentioned spreading, and then there's also just a lot of different argument types. So, for example, instead of, keeping with a traditional case that either supports or is against a given resolution or topic, in progressive debate, you might see arguments that are criticisms of the topic itself that might not inherently affirm or negate the topic. They might advocate for something else. You might see arguments about like topicality, which is a claim that, a certain argument that the affirmative made isn't within the parameters of the topic. It gets into be a lot, but as I've said, this sort of minutia I've included resources for at the end, because that's really not the my goal. My goal today isn't to explain to you all the nuances of progressive debate. I just want to show you how to sort of navigate going about the meta. So next, we're going to talk about research and file production. As I said, it's a very important thing for both Public Forum and LincolnDouglas. And bar a few exceptions, which I've noted in the coming slides, most of these are applicable to both LincolnDouglas and Public Forum. So you could set up your research and preparation systems very similarly amongst your PF squad and your LD squad. So the biggest thing here is leading the effort. What I've seen in my experience is that students are happy to research, but catalyzing it and making sure that they start doing it at the beginning of a topic is the single most important thing that you can do. As a teacher or as a coach, you need to be authoritative about assigning things and making sure that there are clear expectations about what needs to be done. So in the first section on this page called task delegation, I recommend assigning a certain amount of cards from each debater each week, encouraging them to cut, which is pretty much, I'm going to talk about this in a few minutes, but cutting evidence is pretty much, finding, an article online, copy and pasting it into a Word document, and then highlighting the parts that are relevant that will be used and read out loud in a debate round. So if you encourage them to cut a certain amount of evidence each day, that easily multiplies by Monday through Friday. If they cut 3 cards a day, that's 15 cards per debater per 5-day school week. And then if you have 3 debaters, that's 45 cards. So this, and then if you're also in on it, that also adds to it. So I think this is a very important model to making sure that there's a steady inflow of evidence, because on some topics, time is of the essence, right? If you have a current events topic, for example, the cryptocurrency topic, and the SEC releases a news report, or Jerome Powell speaks for, the Federal Reserve, and there's a drastic change in the situation surrounding cryptocurrency within, from one tournament to the next, you're going to want to have updated evidence to make sure that your teams are ready to hash out whatever, Jerome Powell talked about cryptocurrency for. So I recommend this as a sort of baseline thing that, your team should be doing every week during every topic, just to make sure that they have ample amount of preparation and a wide variety of research. If you have a debate class that you teach in school, or if you have practice after school, I definitely suggest reserving time in one or both of these time slots for research and evidence production. most of the time, debate students have a lot of other things going on in their lives, whether that be like academic or, athletic. So for me, being able to dedicate a certain amount of time, in school or at practice was very helpful because, I would go home from debate. This is just an anecdote, but like I would finish debate practice and then I would work a 7-hour shift at Panera Bread to pay for debate. Then I would go home and do homework. And then I would, wake up, do it all again the next day. And having some time cut out in my day that I knew I could, write some analytics or cut some more evidence or scout some, some other team's arguments on the wiki. That was just really important for me and was absolutely instrumental in making sure that I didn't, mentally combust in high school. I had a good amount of time, and it also was just good to do that surrounded by my coach, surrounded by other students, other debaters that I could, bounce ideas off of. So yeah, the last thing I'll say for task delegation is use the wiki, the open evidence website, the value criterion, and other resources. I'm going to talk about all these things later. I just wanted to put these here as a sort of bookmark. So for housekeeping, in terms of how to manage things like files and cases and evidence, things, it's really important to have a good organization system that is accessible for everyone on your team. So I personally, when I was debating, I was the only LDer from my school. So I just used Dropbox because I didn't have to worry about other people accessing my files. It was just me and my coach, and we would both contribute to the Dropbox. And Dropbox is very nice because, it's very nice for smaller squads because it updates other, I don't know how many of you, maybe you all have used Dropbox before, I'm not sure, but if I save a file and Andrew was also in the Dropbox, the next time Andrew opens that file, it will be the file that it'll have my edits in it. The problem is that you can't use Dropbox synchronously with other people, which you can do in Google Drive. So when you're in Google Drive, you can have 20 people on a document and it will live update with everyone's changes. So you can have everyone editing at once, which is obviously really nice for a larger squad. The problem is that Google Drive is not as useful when you are using a software called Verbatim, which is a Microsoft Office Word plugin that instills in your document certain formats and organizational structures within the document to make it easier to file research and stuff. That doesn't work with Google Drive, but it does work with Dropbox. So if your debaters are using that, then Dropbox might be the better choice. But for things like Public Forum that don't really use Verbatim, you're probably good to go with Google Drive. But the most important thing, which is I'm going to skip to number 3 real fast, is that this is uniform. So it's ideal that if you have both LD debaters as well as PF teams, it would be ideal for everyone to be on the same system. But if you do need to have, Dropbox for LD and then Google Drive for PF, that's perfectly fine as long as each squad is uniform in what they use. You don't want to have situations where debaters are emailing each other files, emailing each other the same file 10 times over because they made tiny little edits. You want to make sure that this is the last concern that debaters will have going into the tournament. You want to make sure that they have their files ready, they know where they are, they're organized, which is point number 2, with folders that can be divided by type of argument, topic, argument type, etc. I realize I put type in there twice, but oh well. Students will find a system within themselves that works best for them to organize files. And I recommend you deferring to that system because at the end of the day, they are the ones debating, not you. There have been several practices with Lake Highland Prep this year for me, where I am looking at my students' document and I am just really pained by how they formatted it and how it looks because it's not visually appealing. And, I say to them, I'm like, I would never let one of my documents look like this if I was debating, just because I am really strict when it comes to formatting. I would never organize your files the way that you're doing it. But, well, that's a lie. Their organization, I guess, is fine. But their formatting is just really, really not in line with what I expect or would want. But at the end of the day, it's what works for them. And they succeed with it, and I'm not gonna, as much as like I don't like it, it's one of those things that I know that like I can trust them and they're doing their thing, so I'm gonna let them do it because they understand it much more than I do and it works for them. So discretion for things like that is important to make sure debaters are not uncomfortable with how files are organized or uncomfortable with how their cases are written and things like this. So I've mentioned the word card probably a million times at this point, and I want to review what a card is. So a card is when you go to a website like CNN, or in this instance, Business Insider, or any other valid news website, and you find a article that is relevant to the topic at hand. So this card is about the private appropriation of Indian corporations. And this was an argument that I judged this past weekend about, what would happen if, this was a negative argument, and it was about what would happen if private entities were not allowed to appropriate outer space in like Indian jurisdiction, right? So in India, having private entities in space is key for investor confidence, which is a debate buzzword. Don't worry about that. What I just read and explained is what's called the tagline. So that is the analytic that your debaters put on top of a card to sort of give a summary and announce what the card is going to be about. After that, you have the citation. Sometimes in the citation, debaters will include qualifications for the author. So in this case, the qualifications are Nilanjan Sen, who is an experienced lawyer specializing in international law and arbitration. And then you have the rest of the citation. So these citations, it doesn't matter which format you use. This is actually not even following a format. This is actually just a conglomeration of the information from the article. But you do want to have the last name ahead of the citation so debaters can say Sen 20. And then they start reading the highlighted part of the, they start reading the highlighted part of the evidence. And as you can see, there are different layers of how this card is lined down. So you have the basic underlined layer, which is stuff that's important for the argument of the card. But the highlighted stuff is stuff that debaters will actually be reading in round out loud. So ideally, the highlighted things are going to be the stuff that is, hashed out in the round. And then if the debaters need like background knowledge, or if their opponents want to read a sort of summary of the card, they could read the underlined parts to have a broader picture of what the card is arguing. Yeah, so this is what like an LD or policy card looks like, usually in a progressive setting. In PF, a lot of times debaters will paraphrase evidence, which means that they don't have anything that looks like this. They just sort of take an article and they summarize it all into their own words, the parts that are relevant. They will say, Charles Karcher of the Brookings Institute writes in December of 2021 that cryptocurrencies are unstable and pose a great danger to household investors across the United States, right? Even though what that article could have been is like, a lot longer than that, making a much more nuanced claim. They can summarize it and boil it down. That's what PFers usually do. This, what you see on the screen, is what LD debaters usually do. So next, we're going to talk about training students. And the first thing that we're going to talk about is how to approach a topic. So getting a new topic can be a stressful time. Honestly, at this point, I think I don't know if I should say this, but I've been disappointed with a lot of the topics that have come out recently when they first come out. And then usually I go through, and Nathan can attest to this, but I go through like, a 2-3 week period where I start doing some research and I'm like, okay, I guess the topic is okay. But point being is that the topic release is a stressful time for coaches of any experience level. So I think that being able to have a good orientation where you're confident and effective in topic research and preparation is a really good way to frame the rest of that topic and the rest, like, your entire competitive attitude and your season and the season for your team. One thing to keep in mind is that is that debaters look to you for sort of like stability and confidence. They want to make you are the expert, right? So you want to make sure that you have some insight that you can share with them, even if it's a topic that you don't know about. Try to do some reading in your own time, just so you have a general idea of what arguments might come up, even if you're not doing any research. If this is all you're doing, just like, guiding the research, just try to have some sort of appreciation for it, so debaters know that you care and know that you're interested in what's going on with the topic. So the first thing about approaching a topic is that briefs, like champion briefs, are really good stasis points for starting research on a topic. Topic analyses can give you broad overviews as well as expert insights into the little nooks and crannies of a topic. And then the prepared cards that that make up the bulk of briefs can kickstart students' cases and block files. And block files are files that have evidence in them that are used to refute other teams' cases. So instead of, if your debater is the affirmative debater in a given round, for example, they read an affirmative case. And then if they're debating me, I read a negative case. And then in the next speech, your student reads evidence against my case, to refute my claims. And that's when you use what we call a block file. So it's cards that are relevant to the topic, but oh, I'm sorry. I'm just now seeing some of the comments in the chat. Let me briefly pause to look at them. Okay, Jet, I see your comment. We'll loop back to that at the end, because I have heard of what you mentioned in this, and I did want to mention that, but I wasn't informed enough in making this presentation. So I would love to hear your comments at the end to share to me and everyone else as well. And then Lisa, yes, each card is a piece of evidence, right? So the reason why they're called cards is because back in the old days of debate, people would have index cards like this, where they would write out from the periodicals at the library or textbooks. They would write out the citation and then whole paragraphs of evidence, and then they would put them in the little file containers for these types of cards, and they would take them to tournaments. And then in each round, they would have them open and sort through them and then find, what evidence they need. And they would whip it out and be like, I have a citation that proves you wrong. And then, yeah, that's why they're called cards. And now it's kind of funny because nowadays they low key look like cards. Like, I don't know, maybe it's just because I've been in this activity for a long time. But when I see this, I just kind of like, it speaks to me, the word card. But then again, it's because, I don't know, this is just like linguistic theory, I guess. But yeah, it kind of looks like a card. Anyway, so going back to the topic approach, sorry for that tangent. I'm going to try to keep an eye on the chat. Yes, it is very acceptable to add evidence to LD that is not in the brief. The brief is not by any means a limitation on what your students are allowed to read on a given topic. It's more of just a purchased product that can help you in your research. So all of the evidence from the brief is obviously available online. You can use any evidence that's online, or in one of the lost arts of debate is using like books from the library, because people nowadays seem limited to just websites and internet searches. But using journal articles and things that are a little bit off the beaten path is a very good way to get fresh evidence that can advance your students' arguments. So going back to approaching the topic, briefs are really good. I highly recommend them. I think most of you are probably subscribed to Champion Briefs, so that's a great start. Definitely distribute those to your students to make sure that they read them and look through them, etc. The second point is that topics are often regurgitated by the NSDA. I have seen many topics in my debate lifespan that have been reused or reworded or follow very similar ideas of older topics, to the point that the research on each of them is mutually intelligible, as my roommate linguistics major would say. I think that a good example of this is the space topic for January, February of LD for this coming January, February. It is about the private appropriation of space. And my freshman year at the University of Florida, I debated in college policy, and the topic was about China, US, Russia space cooperation. Sorry, my sophomore year at UF, China, Russia, US space cooperation. And although it wasn't specifically about the private entities going into space, it involved a lot of things like regulatory negotiation and private contracts between the government and contractors, and a lot of the same concepts in space, like space traffic and satellites and things like that, where the topic knowledge is very applicable. But even if you don't have someone that's debated both topics, you can still find ample resources online from an old topic if it relates to a new topic. And this is, I think, a really good way to just get a head start on topic research. You can see what is going on with, like what direction that topic went in, so you can expect which direction the new topic will go in. It's just a very helpful thing to have in your back pocket. And the way that you can find this is going onto the NSDA website and going to their topic page, and they have a long list of the historical topics of LD, PF, and policy. And I also recommend checking out the NDT CETA, which is a different circuit from the NSDA. I'm going to put that in the chat. NDT CETA is the college debate circuit, and they are the NSDA of college. They regulate and decide the topic, they draft the topics, etc. So there's a list somewhere on their website about previous topics. So you can always look through that. The third thing I wanted to say is what I alluded to at the beginning of this slide, which is that you should start preparation right away. Assigning deadlines is super, super important, and holding debaters to those expectations just it's just required. Like, you have to do that, because making them have a sort of assignment is what will make sure that they are on track to doing adequate preparation. As I've said, in my time as a debater and in my time coaching, I understand that like debaters are often very excited about debate. They like debate, they like the research, they like arguing about it, but even on like mundane topics. But it's just about pushing them like to get started. And then once they get started, they take care of the rest of it in terms of motivation. Usually, I mean, ideally, that's what I've seen. But getting them started, like getting them to like write a case, that will then encourage them to be like, okay, now I have to write, the other case. So I have my cases done. And then after that, they have to write block files to defend those cases. And it kind of gets them, it gets their brain going, and it gets them interested in continuing research. So just making sure that like, especially early on, there are rigid expectations, then, I think that bodes well for the rest of the topic and the rest of the season as well. If you have Facebook, I'm a big Facebook user. My friends make fun of me for it, but I love Facebook, and I specifically love debate Facebook. The NDCA, which stands for the National Debate Coaches Administration, has a Facebook group, and it's actually it's not at all like, it is official, like it is the NDCA Facebook group, but it's not official in that it's all NDCA stuff. People post job postings in there. People post, questions, soliciting advice. It's a very friendly and open community where you can, engage with it, even if you're not a member of the NDCA, or if you're a brand new coach, or, really anyone involved in the debate community. You can rely on that group to have really good conversations. And in relation to this slide, usually there are very good conversations about the topics. If a topic comes out and a young coach is confused about how to approach it with their students, they might post a thread in there, and there might be some really good discourse from more experienced debaters as well as more experienced coaches about what they think you should do to go forward with researching a topic. What does that look like? I've been saying a lot of words about this, like, what it looks like to approach a topic, but I want to give an example. One of the most recent threads in the NDCA Facebook group was about the space topic for January, February in the LincolnDouglas debate. And there was a coach that said something like, I don't know how to approach this topic. This topic like is confusing, whatever. Which like not my favorite topic. I understood. I looked through the thread because I was also wondering the same thing. And an experienced coach and debater, actually, who coached me for some time in high school, named Jacob Nails. He was my lab leader at camp. He commented and left a really insightful comment. And what he said is that this topic, and I'm going to go back briefly to that topic so you can look at it, because this was really good insight. Even if you're not coaching this topic, it's just a good example of how you can like break down a topic. So we're talking about the topic on the bottom of this page. Resolved, the appropriation of outer space by private entities is unjust. What Jacob Nails said in that NDCA Facebook thread is that this topic is not so much a space topic as it is a property topic set in space, which is to say that you should understand this topic as a topic about property rights, about the philosophical tradition of like who can own property and who public property belongs to, right? You shouldn't think about it as like a space policy topic. You should think about it as, a topic about private property or public property that just deals with space, right? So it's kind of an inversion of the subject and object of the resolution. Instead of the subject being outer space, the subject is private property or property, and the object is space, right? So it kind of flips it around. And insights like that you can just find on like, a random Facebook comment can make a world of difference in the way that you approach a topic. So I definitely recommend subscribing to that Facebook group and just keeping an eye on it, scrolling through it, seeing if there's any useful insights there. Finally, practice rounds are really important. The earlier you can get a practice round going, the better. What my coach used to do in high school is she would assign us to have cases due on the day of the practice round, such that your practice round is after school on Tuesday, and thus your case obviously has to be ready by then. And we would know which side we were going to debate in like the first practice round. So we knew like which case was due first, and like our other team, the other PF team on our school team would, prep the other side, and we would debate each other. And it worked really, really well. Practice rounds are also just really good because it sort of breaks the ice and gets, debaters involved in the topic, and it gets them talking about it, because once they start exchanging ideas instead of just looking at their computer screen, makes a really big difference. The comment above your comment, Lisa, was the college debate circuit that you could find the college debate topics on. So NDT-CETA is like the NSDA of college. It's just a different administration that chooses topics and hosts tournaments and things like that. So yeah, practice rounds are really important. I definitely encourage them. Yeah. So next we are going to talk about novices. Novices are the building blocks of your team. If you're starting out a team, or if you're continuing the legacy of a team, you need to make sure that you have a steady flow of novices in order to continue the long-term health and success of your team. So I have a few recommendations for novices. First is that YouTube is a really important resource for novices, because a lot of debate videos, both sort of tutorial videos, but as well as practice round videos, are posted on YouTube. But what I'm thinking about are rounds that are recorded, not practice rounds, but rounds that are recorded from tournaments, like real life rounds that, are posted on the internet, are the best thing for debaters to watch. In high school, I didn't have, I taught myself LD, but really YouTube taught me LD, because I would, watch that. That was my primary method of learning how to debate on the national circuit, was watching YouTube videos. I watched a lot of YouTube videos a week, just seeing different rounds, rewatching them, flowing them, if you know what flowing is, which is to say like taking notes of them and analyzing like which arguments mattered and which ones were stronger than others, things like this. I highly recommend encouraging YouTube videos. Teams of any size can and should utilize peer mentoring for debate events. Rachel talked about this in the speech section of today's clinic, but I want to reemphasize it in the context of debate. Debate has a really steep learning curve, but once that learning curve is once you begin it, it's kind of, it accelerates and debaters get more comfortable. But it's really important that before novices hit that learning curve, they're guided by varsity members. And I think that there is a unique benefit of having other students mentor them instead of you. Obviously you should be there, but assigning specific peer mentors is just really important, because I think that it on some level it's easier to learn from someone who's closer to your age and, you know, is a competitor who is also enthusiastic about the activity and is just a little bit more relatable. So if you do like one-on-one drills with like, you know, assigned peer mentors, I think that could be really beneficial for the growth of novices. Also, that creates a feedback effect where those novices become trained to teach other novices. And then after that, you just have, you know, an environment that's conducive to a team culture of preparation, practicing with each other, and succeeding together, which is just really important. I would say with novices, start with the building blocks. A coach that I have immense respect for once told me that when she's at camp, when she's teaching at summer debate institutes, the debaters that she thinks are the most promising are the ones that started out from traditional debate, which is to say that they came from a school that emphasizes learning traditional debate before learning technical debate or progressive debate. And the reason for this is because if you jump in to teaching debaters this, if this is the first thing debaters see and they just become a robot to create cards that look like this, they will not understand the building blocks of what makes an argument an argument. And what I'm talking about here is the very basic, like, sort of rhetorical theory of what an argument is. Claim, warrant, impact. Hot dogs are good. I like to eat them. My claim is that hot dogs are good. I don't have a warrant in that statement. A warrant could be hot dogs are good because I like hot dogs because they taste good, and so I eat them a lot, right? So the claim is that, like, I like hot dogs. The warrant is that they taste good, and the impact is that I eat hot dogs, right? That is an argument that has a claim, a warrant, and an impact. If debaters do not understand those basic building blocks of rhetoric, then they're not going to, they'll be able to read stuff like this, but it's not going to be a full understanding of the sort of theory behind debate, persuasion, and argumentation. Which is to say that the resources that you should start novices off with are traditional resources. That means slow-paced rounds. That means traditional cases. That means easy to understand arguments. And YouTube also has all those things on there, right? There are traditional rounds on YouTube, which is what you should be starting your novices off with. What I will leave with you here in the chat is if you look up like NSDA final rounds for LincolnDouglas, that is where you'll find traditional slow-paced rounds, like the final round of the National Speech and Debate Association National Tournament. The judges on that panel are always older judges that are, I shouldn't say older judges, more experienced judges that tend to be traditional, that aren't favorable for like reading advanced argumentation in front of. So those arguments are always slow and easy to understand. So next we're going to go to resources. Mostly this slideshow will be proliferated to all of you after my section, but I really just want to walk through everything here to make sure that you all have a okay understanding before you know, we let you go on your way to use these in the future. The first resource might surprise you, but it's before I go to the next slide, I just need to like really express how, and I'm not being sarcastic here, this is a very, very important thing to do as a debate coach, and that is to watch the movie Resolved. It is a documentary that will entertain you. It's a documentary that, non-debaters watch, but it is the single most important thing you can do if you were going to coach debate. Not only does it teach you the social and political history of the modern activity, but it also just straight up informs you of a lot of the technical aspects of how debate works. So a lot of the things that I purposefully skimmed over in today's presentation, this documentary will dive into and explain to you in an entertaining way, and you'll come out of it having a much more solid understanding of how debate works. It's free on YouTube. It was made in 2007. It's about policy debate, but again, it's applicable. Trust me. It's just really important that I think every debate coach watches this. Definitely give this a watch. It's I think an hour and a half. I don't know. It's been on YouTube for a while, but it's definitely a bootlegged version. But hopefully it'll be up for a while longer. But yeah. NDCA wikis. So as I mentioned, progressive argumentation involves a lot of really complicated jargony arguments. And one of the ways that the community has sort of created an equilibrium between resource disparities, in that some teams have a lot of coaches and can prep a lot of arguments, and then other teams don't have a lot of coaches, is what we call disclosure. So disclosure is the idea that debaters post their arguments on the internet once they've read them. So other debaters can go and look at those arguments and say, oh, that's a good argument. I should prepare arguments against it in case I debate that debater. So this is what's called the NDCA-LD wiki, and there's also a PF wiki. And as you can see on the left side, there's a list of schools. So, if your debater is debating me, Sarasota CK, then they would go on the internet before the round, and they would go to the wiki and scroll down to Sarasota and click on Sarasota, and then they would click on my name, and then there will be a list of arguments and citations of the authors and the evidence that I've read in previous rounds. And that gives your debaters a understanding of what I am likely to read and what they should do to prepare for the round. Usually tournaments give debaters about 30 minutes to get ready for their round, between the pairing being blasted from tab room, which Ben is going to talk about in the next section, to the round actually starting. So they have a few minutes to research, to finalize their arguments. And what they can do is they can go to this website and look for their opponent if they're listed on here, if their opponent participates in this practice called disclosure, and they can have a reasonable expectation of what they're going to be debating about. But again, this is mostly important for progressive debate. If you're on a traditional circuit and you're not doing things like spreading or reading advanced arguments, it's not a huge concern. This is not something to worry about at a local. This is something to worry about if you send a team to Harvard or Berkeley. This is when you should start using the NDCA-LD wiki or the PF wiki. Tab room, I'm sure you all know what tab room is, but the particular reason that I would like to talk about tab room is because within debate events, there are a lot of different judges with different experience levels. And in order to inform debaters what these judges expect of them, they have paradigms listed on many judges, and many tournaments require judges to have paradigms. So a lot of judges nowadays have paradigms. And these, you might know what these are, but these are just a sort of space for judges to explain what they expect and see in a round. So this is my paradigm, a screenshot of it. So at the top of it, I have a bunch of just procedural important things to know. So first is my email, in case debaters want to share evidence with me during the round, because when debaters are talking really fast in front of me, we usually share documents so we can read along when they're talking. So first is my email. Next are my pronouns. Very brief summary of my experience, which is, I should update that because it's above 350 now, but the amount of rounds I've judged since I've graduated high school, all of my conflicts. So these are teams that I cannot judge because there's a conflict of interest, whether or not this team has, whether this team has paid me to do research in the past before, or if I've judged for them, or if I've coached them. things like that, schools that I am not allowed to judge, or in the case of like Durham AA, Durham BT, Charlotte Latin EL, Charlotte Latin AP, those are individual debaters, i.e. their initials that I've coached individually that I'm not allowed to judge. But I can coach Durham Academy if I wanted to, but I can't coach Durham AA because I've worked with that student individually. Below that, I just have some updates to my paradigm proper that I've included for the world of online debate. Well, the top one's not about online debate, but the B and C points are about online debate. Anyway, so this is a good resource so your debaters know what to expect of the judge. I see a chat box notification. I didn't know sharing evidence with the judge was allowed. I have already judged LD. Should I do this since we use Tabroom? You should post a paradigm if that's your question. If your question was if you should share evidence, you do not have to. If you do not listen to progressive debates, if you are what we call like a traditional judge, you do not have, like, if you don't see a need for evidence to be shared, then don't worry about it. It's not a concern. But at the national circuit level, when kids are reading at 500 words a minute, and you'll know when that situation happens, when it happens, obviously, that's when you can be like, okay, I don't really follow this, you can send me your cases. In traditional settings, even when cases are read at normal paces, conversational paces, sharing of evidence in cases can be valuable for accessibility purposes. If someone is hard of hearing, for example, or if someone has a speech processing disorder, it can be very useful for them to have a written copy in front of them. So that's possibly a reason why you might see evidence sharing on the local level, even in traditional contexts. Okay, yeah, that's great. I'm a big advocate for traditional judges. Whenever I'm on a panel at national circuit tournaments, and there's a traditional judge on the panel with me, I tell the debaters to have a traditional round and pretend that I am also a traditional judge, because I find it very disrespectful for debaters to sort of ignore traditional judges and just go for the ballots of debaters that can listen to spreading or are familiar with advanced argumentation. I'm very concerned about the sort of labor value of judging and making sure that, judges, the time of judges is respected. So that's a line that you can lay down. You can tell people that you're a traditional judge and that, this is what you expect. And I'm trying to share with like my friends and my students and stuff that what I do should be the norm. I'm obviously biased, but I do think that if there's a traditional judge on a panel, the debater should debate traditionally. Yeah. So I just think it's unfair. I don't like it. And honestly, it's just straight up awkward because like I feel bad for like the traditional judge. I'm like, this is unfair that like, it's just weird. It's weird for everyone involved, right? Yeah, Jet. What Jet just put in the chat, 100%. Accessibility for everyone is important. And it just, my dad was my judge in high school. He would come to tournaments with me and judge LincolnDouglas, and he was a traditional judge. And I just like immensely appreciated the time that he put in, to travel with me to tournaments and to listen to teenagers argue with each other on the weekends. And luckily, like on my local circuit where he mostly judged, people were respectful of his paradigm, but it would just make me really sad if I knew that he was going into like an elimination round at a national circuit tournament and he was just like, lost. Like I would feel bad that anyway. So we're all on the same page here. Definitely spread the word because I think that we're on the right side of debate history with this. And I have that in my paradigm as well. That's something that I've written there so debaters can see it before the round. Anyway, that's Tabroom/paradigms. And then let's see what else I have. Useful websites. I'm just going to buzz through these. Event reference guides, PF guide and LD guide just have how to crash courses on what each event is if you need more reinforcement on that. The NSDA website has general resources for all events. It's just a useful thing. There's a lot of, especially if you're a member, you have access to a lot of really cool things on there, including recorded rounds on top of YouTube. More research tools. The value criterion has a lot of philosophical sort of arguments and evidence for LincolnDouglas debaters. Debate.cards has a lot of evidence on it for more like current events things, because Debate.cards is a website that files all of the cards from the policy wiki. So I talked about the LD and the PF wiki, but the policy wiki is where teams publish thousands of cards about the policy topic, because as I said, policy is really, really intense. So Debate.cards files all of those and puts them into a searchable database where you can go in and search for a keyword and find what you need. Verbatim is the software I alluded to earlier. I think that we're going to talk a little bit about it during the question and answer session, so I'll leave that there. Some miscellaneous resources. Girls Debate is a sort of blog website that is an advocacy group for the female and non-male participation in debate. There's a lot of articles and tutorials and things just to make debate more accessible. It's run by Jasmine Stidham from Harvard Westlake, and she's really good about publishing useful articles and commentary pieces about how to reduce like inequalities in the debate space. So that's a useful read for any debate coach. Briefly is similar, but it's a brief website. It's Victory Briefs Institute is another camp. They publish articles and things like this. Tab Room I've already mentioned. And then the final point here is how to use verbatim to cut cards. Really, really good just YouTube tutorial that I recommend you watching if you're interested in using verbatim, or if your students are interested in using verbatim. I could spend easily like 3 hours here trying to explain verbatim, but this is a really concise video that will show you how to use it. I think it's actually multi-part, so you can break it up, and there's just a lot of information there that's useful for you. So that's everything that I wanted to share. We have, I think, some time for questions, so I'm happy to take any questions that anyone has. I'm gonna end my screen share just so I can see the Zoom, but if you need me to reshare anything, I would be more than happy to do that during questions. Sorry if I spoke fast. My propensity to speak fast comes from debate, and it's kind of spilled over into my real world life. Also, I'm excited about this stuff, so I get a certain level of adrenaline. But yeah. Thank you, Price. Yeah, I hope that y'all took some notes, but also, as I said, we're gonna share this PowerPoint so y'all have access to it throughout the season. I'm gonna actually copy and paste what Jet put in the chat earlier into my yeah. Jet, if you don't mind, I'm just gonna put this into the presentation. I'm gonna quote it and cite you just because what you said is great, and I would like to make sure that people have access to that. Awesome, Arthur. I'm glad that you found it useful. Thanks, Jet. Yeah, Lisa, it can be difficult to recruit debaters. Debate can be intimidating. I think if they're excited about current events or things like that, if they want to be a lawyer, you can capitalize on those talking points to express to them the importance of debate. Pretty much a lot of people in our government nowadays were debaters. If you watch Resolved, it will talk about this. Like, debate is a very important training ground for law, for policy analysis, for politics, advocacy work, everything like that. So if they're interested in that, that's one thing that you can use to kind of push them in the direction of debate. Yeah, okay, so Jet, great question. Okay, so I'm going to answer Jet's question real fast first. Jet, I currently have the same issue. I currently have a lot of students who participate in so many things that I was in high school. I was in debate. I worked at Panera Bread. I'm an Eagle Scout. So I was busy. I had things on my plate. I had, advanced coursework and stuff. But the kids that I coach now are just, I don't even know how to explain to you how many commitments they have. And I'm sure you're in the same position. And to be honest, I don't know. This is a problem that I've only first experienced this year. And the only thing that's, begun to work for me is just like making a very consistent schedule where we meet at the same time every week with different teams. And, if they make it, they make it. If they don't, they don't. The website When to Meet is really helpful for finding meeting times, but that doesn't help much because I know your question isn't about that. Your question is about making them not feel burned out. And it's an ongoing worry. I mean, once you have a big team that can start producing prep, on its own, that it makes it helpful because, it kind of disperses the workload, but getting there is the hard part. So I understand what you're saying, and I'm sorry I don't have a better answer for you because it's a struggle that I've also learned about this year. Wendy, any additional advice for programs just starting out? I would say, like I said earlier, definitely capitalize on the importance of debate for long-term career goals. That gets a lot of students, especially ones that are interested in current events and the news and stuff like that. Definitely just simple things like flyers around campus, having refreshments. I mean, that might be difficult in the world of COVID, but just little things that make people take the bait to go to the first debate meeting or an interest meeting or something. Those can all be really helpful. Honestly, parents, if you sell parents on debate, I can promise you that kids will start coming in. If you recruit parents instead of kids, you will get the kids as a side effect of that, because once parents are sold on debate, they will make their kids do debate. Just because parents are very all about public speaking, they really like it. It's a really good sell for parents, in my opinion. So those are some things I would say for you, Wendy. So Tammy had some contribution as well. Online debate, as difficult as it may be it can be difficult at times, but we're very fortunate that our activity hasn't died from COVID. So that's a selling point compared to other activities. Recruiting parents is great. And also if you have some overly ambitious parents, they can start a booster club or, do other stuff. Having parental support can be really good, financially, socially, logistically for tournaments. There's really great opportunity for that. Where do you draw the line on helping students prep? I'm fully against writing full-on cases. Good, I completely agree with that. Do not write full-on cases except for maybe for novices. Spot on there, Jet. I completely agree with you. Yes. So I also, similar position. I also love the prep process. I would say a really good opportunity for you is block files, because cases are kind of you start a case and you finish it. It's objective when it's finished. You can't add that much more to a case. Block files are where the opportunities for arguments grow exponentially, right? Because there can be a million different arguments on a topic. So I would recommend contributing to block files instead of cases, because obviously it's most important that your kids are most familiar with their cases. But block files, they can get off the hook with not being as familiar with them. So that's where I would say you can hop in, especially just because the block file is such a daunting task, because there's so many possible arguments. That's where I would recommend drawing the line. I think that's probably a good line to draw. And then, yeah, what Price said about putting them into teams, sort of delegating prep into groups is also a really good strategy. In public forum, this works really well because people are already partnered. In LincolnDouglas, it can get a little bit more tricky, but partnering people or putting them into trios, depending on the size of your team, can do wonders for prep development. Yep, not a problem. I think that we're going to start gearing towards, I guess, do we have a break now? I know we have a few minutes left of questions, and I'm happy to, do we have a break now, Andrew? Okay.
Yes, if anyone has any other questions for Charles, we can certainly stick around. But otherwise, we're going to move to our last break of the day, which is going to be preceding our tournament logistics and preparation session with Ben Gaddis. That's going to start at 3:30. So you have a little bit less than 20 minutes here to come back into our last session. Lisa, thank you so much for that feedback. We are going to be putting together other webinars and sessions to continue diving into these topics. I know that especially for coaching speech events and coaching debate events, there's a lot more to discuss. There is always more to discuss. And we'll do our best to continue providing those resources for you. So thank you so much, Charles. And again, if anyone has other questions for Charles, feel free to stick around. I know he's able to stay here for a few more minutes, and then we'll reconvene officially at 3:30 with our next session. Thank you all so much.